Okay, good evening, everybody, and good evening, and welcome to uh, live session for tonight. Let me make sure I'm not echoing here, and I don't think I am. So, let's turn this off. Okay, I think I'm no longer echoing, and we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 7:30, and let me share my screen with you, and we're going to talk a little bit about certifications tonight. It's going to be a little different than I normally do. I typically will talk about something. I guess it's about the same, right? It's really kind of the same subject. We're still talking about AI, and but we're just talking about it in a different, in a different sense. So let's do this, and let's turn on my presentation. And I do want to kind of talk about tonight, um, just the idea of building your authority. And if you have been maybe one of our, white label or PLR customers, and you've been trying to figure out, okay, well, am I going to be this direct marketing person? And it takes a bit of, it takes a different, I say a different kind of energy, right, to be that person. Let me see. Okay, I think I'm sorry to hear. Okay. Um, I don't know if if I came across here. So let me kind of back up here. And what I want to talk about tonight is I want to talk a little bit about just the idea of doing some certifications. And if I wasn't on the last minute or so, what kind of sparked this was just kind of thinking about some of our customers, some of our Ultimate Insider members. And from having talked to everybody over the course of the years, not everybody wants to be a direct marketing person, right? Not everybody wants to be, at their end, the kind of person that has all the right copy. I think people want to be able to create an income, but you may not necessarily want to do it in that way. And so, um, in our particular niche and in our particular industry, and it could be just the way things are right now, people don't necessarily value necessarily credentials, and it's not necessary, right? It's not necessarily that you can, because you have credentials, it doesn't mean that you can do the job, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to perform for a client, doesn't mean that your content is good, doesn't mean that you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean any of those things. But at the same time, though, for some people, that badge is a brand. And so for some people, if you don't want to be the kind of person, let's say, and you're going to have screenshots on your sales page, again, it's nothing wrong with that because that's social proof. If you don't want to do that, you do need to have some leverage where when somebody comes to your sales page, somebody comes to your website, somebody comes and they can't start to listen to you, that you've got something where you can compete against other people. And again, I understand I don't necessarily like to do screenshots. I don't, and I don't think I even have them on any of our sales pages. And I think I removed them years ago, if I even ever had them. And I always felt a little weird about it. However, they work. They work because for some people, it is a trigger in their mind that, well, hey, I need to do business with this person if I want the kind of screenshots, if I want the kind of results that are on those screenshots. So what do you do in kind of to compete? How do you compete if that's not necessarily what you want to do? And one of the ways in which you can compete is you can put things that you have done and that are visible on your site and in your presence. And that's really what we're talking about today, especially as we start to move down this road of AI, where everybody is an AI consultant and everybody's an AI coach. You and I need to be able to separate ourselves. And that's what we're going to talk about here tonight. I want to return to something that I talked about last week, and that really is the power of doing one ecosystem at a time. And so I've kind of focused on Google, and there are a lot of reasons for that. And, I don't look at things in terms of this one is the best, it's got the best features, it's got the best this, and it got the best that. I think that when you focus on one ecosystem, the number one reason why I have chosen to focus on Google is NotebookLM because it is the brain of everything. And when you really get down in it and you understand what it does, and I've been trying to do that on our channel to really help you understand and help people understand that when you make that the brain of your AI and you have control over it, then you really can do just about what you want to do on AI, regardless of what it is, whether it's agents, whether it's agents for other people, whether it's you want to create an app, whatever you want to do, when you understand the power of Notebook LM, that you can actually do a lot of these things without coding. And I know the big buzz right now is, you know, doing agents with Claude and how Claude is doing all these things. There's really not one thing that you can do that you can't do in the Google ecosystem that you can do in Claude, right? It's going to be different, right? Some things are going to take place in the cloud. I don't necessarily want those things taking place on my desktop as it would with Claude. And again, it is a different way of being able to think. And so that's what we've been talking about over the last few months. We've kind of switched our brand over to something different. So Notebook LM is a brain. That's really kind of the power of using one ecosystem. And then when we start with the Notebook LM as the center of everything, what we do is we start gathering everything into our notebooks, organized and unorganized, focused and unfocused. And if you're thinking about, well, I don't know if I want to pay for this AI, you know, being able to have multiple notebooks, more notebooks, and be able to put more in those notebooks, like you can put 300 sources in a notebook, it becomes at some point, if you're going to pay for one, if you're going to pay for two, I know and no one's really going to get rid of Chat GPT, right? It's kind of like the legacy. It's kind of like the step up if you're paying for one at all. But you really got to think about whether or not you start paying for Google. I don't get paid for this. They're not paying me to say this, and I don't get anything for this. I use it, and I really have just kind of come to depend on making sure that everything is organized, and that's beyond having a good filing system. Notebook LM is going to help you when you start doing AI as things progress. Once we get everything organized, we can then start synthesizing. And so when you start talking about, I'm going to create an audio overview or a video overview or a report or something in the studio, that's a synthesis. So in other words, I'm taking all the stuff that I put in my notebook and I'm creating one thing with it that synthesizes everything. And I can do that in any form that I want to. So Notebook LM becomes a way for you to create a synthesis. I then take that synthesis to influence everything else I do. So in other words, I then have control over the AI. It's everything starts with me and the way I organize things and the way I want to influence it. We then move on to personal intelligence. And a number of you who are our white label or our PLR customers, you know we did a course on personal intelligence because I can dictate then that based on my past, right? Based on what I have done inside of an AI account, I can then influence everything else I do. So when I start talking about agents, I can start influencing my emails, my schedules, all those other things. So everything that you can do in all these other AIs, once you understand personal intelligence, that's what you do. But you start, though, by understanding what Notebook LM is and start getting everything in there. And then what I say, you start appifying everything. So in other words, we just did a course this week, very simple to understand how to understand Google Opal. And when you understand Google Opal, I can do a customer facing app. And I don't have to know coding. I don't have to know any of that stuff. All I really have to do is know what I want to accomplish. I can have an internal app for my internal information. I can have it so that it does what I want it to do. Now, again, a number of you who have been using GPTs and you're selling GPTs, it's pretty much the same thing. What it does, though, is it incorporates Notebook LM. So in other words, I still control everything, and everything I can put into a Notebook LM, I can control it through a synthesis, and I get it into an app. So I can appify everything. So any process I want. I can then repeat that process over and over again in my business. Over and over again, any repeat process. Once I understand how I'm using I can then synthesize it into a notebook and then get it to repeat itself over and over again through an app. So that's kind of the principle. That's what we talked about last week. And that's what I'm going to talk about every time. Just the power of one ecosystem. And again, I don't look at things as is Google better than this one? I don't think that's a relevant thing. Every AI company is one click away, right? One step away from, politics getting involved. You probably saw that this week with Anthropic and OpenAI. You may not be into politics, but politics did get into those companies, and it's now interfering in the way they want to do business, how they want to do data centers, right? All of those things are political in nature. They don't have anything to do with you and I. They don't care about the way you and I use AI. And that starts to affect us is that when they don't have enough computing power, they propose limits. So when you hit limits on Anthropic, you hit limits on Claude, you hit limits on ChatGPT, you hit limits on Gemini, it is because it costs a lot of money to do this stuff, and they need computing power, and now the politics of this is that they got to pay for it, right? So maybe they're not doing that in your local area, but it is in a lot of local areas. They don't want their electricity bill to go up for the sake of AI. What they want the AI companies to do is to pay for this. So all those things are going to impact the way we use this AI now and in the future. That being said, um, I, again, I do not look at one as better than the other one. I just think that the company that's going to outlast them all will eventually be Google. Right? I could be wrong about that, but I guess it's a safe bet, and they've also got NotebookLM. So those two things are reason involved that if I have to use one ecosystem, I'm not chasing every other AI. So I'm done looking at OpenClaw and all that other stuff. You'd be amazed what that'll do for you, that if you just stop chasing all these new things, right? Kind of feel like, well, I need to know all of these things in order to do AI. Well, maybe you do and maybe you don't. If you just for a week do this experiment, just do one. Stop chasing them all. Stop chasing the news. Stop worrying about what somebody posts on Facebook, somebody posts on Instagram, what they're saying. I did all this thing and I did all these agents. Stop chasing all these other things. Focus on one. Doesn't have to be Google, like I'm doing. Just focus on one. Just do it for a week and see what it does to your business. Okay, the power of one ecosystem. Now we're now in this new era, right? So basically, we're, it's not enough to just produce content. It's not enough to just produce the courses. People want to know who's behind it. So, in other words, um, uh, I want to be able to give you training that you can do that will prove your expertise. It may or may not be enough over time. What people will eventually want is to know you know what you're talking about. Yeah, okay, I'll pay for your course. I'll get into your community. I'll do your thing. But I want to know first is are you who you say you are? And one of the ways in which you and I are going to need to be able to do that is we need to going to be able to have something. Now, again, remember, one way to do that is to have a screenshot, right? That's one way to do it. Is to say, look at all these customers and look at all this income I've generated. That's my proof. I can do that, but you may not want to do that, right? It is a way to do direct marketing, is a way to do direct response marketing. And if you are never going to be this direct response marketing person, you may have transitioned over from corporate. You may have been a cubicle rat all your life. And if you've been a cubicle rat all your life, this is a foreign world. Like why all these pages look so crazy? Right? Why is every place I go, everybody's kind of using this same phraseology? That's because it's direct response. And direct response works when people are looking at things emotionally, they will make a decision to buy from you. And it is a way of doing business, and it just works. But if you don't necessarily want to do that, and you want people to come to you, you want people to look for you need to have something else other than just my stuff is awesome. And now what we now have in the form of certifications is that we can now verify that we know what we're talking about. So Performance Labs now puts you into a test. It basically puts you in a class where you learn some things and then you prove you know you can do it. And in some cases, these are proctored exams. So in some cases, these exams you're not going to be able to just kind of fake it by using your own AI in the background. You're going to need to, you're going to be in an environment where you're going to have to prove you know what you're talking about. Now, what does that do? You might say that's inconvenient, that's unrealistic, but you'll then know that the people who have that certification, they then know what they're talking about. And you want to be that person, you can be that. Again, I want to make this clear to you. I don't have anything to sell you. Right now, again, yeah, I do want you to get our online our video curriculum. I do want you to get our cheat sheets. That's not what this is about. I'm teaching you about what the certifications can do and why you want to think about it and why you want to add it to everything else you're doing in terms of teaching and being a trainer and being a coach and being an online influencer and implementing AI so that you can be the person that someone chooses over and above everything. That's high signal authority. So, in other words, the minute that you say, "Well, I've got these certifications," right? It's a signal. It's not. It doesn't mean it's going to make the sale for you. It's not going to get you a job if you're. And a lot of you, some of you all, you may have a few gray hairs like me. You're probably not going back into the job market. However, this is a signal, and people process it almost in the background. It's running in their. It's running on their hard drive someplace. That this is credibility, and all you're doing here is you're borrowing all the credibility that Google has. You're borrowing their name when you get that certification. It's not, it doesn't mean that you are better than everybody else, but it does mean that when they put their name on your badge and that you've got it, it says something to the rest of the world when it comes to AI. And whatever you're doing with B2B, all right, you're going to businesses and you're saying, well, hey, I know how to implement. I know what this means. You will be taken seriously. You'll get in the room. Now you probably need to know how to close sales. You need to know how to do lead generation, all those things, lead nurturing. This is not what that is. They're not going to teach you those things. What they're going to do is they're going to say, you know what you're talking about. I'm going to give you a badge. You put it on your website, put it on your business card, put it on everything you say, put it on side your books, and so you can say I'm a certified expert. Right. So again, it's not going to do anything for you. It's not going to do everything for you. It's not magic. It's not a magic bullet. What it is it says you've passed and you know what you're talking about. Now, this is a good time to do it between now and June because um, educator levels 1 and 2 is free. So they will give you a voucher to do this free. So you got to do educator level 1 and 2 anyway. And so what this does is it gives you the authority to teach Google AI. Now, again, you can teach Google AI without these. You don't have to have these, but there's nothing. It doesn't cost you anything. So as of right now, when you be now again, now you might you might have to work at passing this, but once you do levels 1 and 2, it's not going to cost you anything except your time. Okay, so I'm gonna say, look, 90 days, just take 90 days off. Just take 90 days off of following other AIs, 90 days off of getting sold to, and then put yourself in this. Now, is it gonna is it it can't hurt you, is my it's my point. The next level up is Google Certified Educator. Right now, it's free. So it's not gonna cost you anything. So again, between now and June, it's a good thing to do, right? These four certifications, they can't hurt you to have them. Google AI Essentials right now is going to cost you $49, right? So basically, you've got to take a course in Coursera, and then at the end of the course, they let you take the exam, right? So that's all Coursera. Go through them, and then you do that course. So you can walk out with what I call the authority stack. And what it says is that when it comes to AI, you know what you're talking about. You can be I'm an implementer. I do want to kind of talk about, okay, how do I monetize this? Right? So what are you going to do? Let's say you do all this, say, and maybe $49, you want your $49 back. And you want to see that it comes back to you. You don't want to just be spending money. Like Charles Harper told me to get certification, and then I paid all this money and nothing happened. Well, okay, it may not happen, but there's some things that you can do. One thing that I suggest you do is that you start thinking about where you can form a community. Now people now view knowledge as a commodity. And so what you and I can do is we can start looking for areas where we can gather people and where we have the level of expertise. So in other words, as they say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, or one-eyed woman is king. So you need to go where where there are blind people, right? And when it comes to AI, and you got to gather them together. You got to put them in community. Now, when I start talking about community, that doesn't necessarily mean you got to have a discussion group. I don't know if people are into discussion anymore. I mean, I don't know that people are, I think people are burned out on Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff. And maybe they're not doing that, right? So, but people still want to be in community. They still want to be someplace where you create a safe place for people to ask their questions and get answers. And so all of my research, right? My research in my doctoral program is really on communities of practice. So in other words, you create something where the blind people get better. They get sight where in your community. So you've got to find out where you are the one-eyed man and the blind people need you. And so if you can find that community, there's nothing that you can't do in terms of monetization. So again, we're transitioning in direct response from the authority group to the community group, where the community and the crowd helps each other, and that you were the leader of the community, right? So you should be leading your community. Now, I will be doing some things on leadership, during this calendar year, but right now, even if you don't necessarily have any instruction, um, you understand what your leadership style is. You start leading a community in the areas where you connect with AI. And basically, this is one of the reasons why you start with getting something that says, well, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Research to practice. So in other words, one of the things that I see in my own research is that um, content is going in two directions now with AI. And so people want to collaborate to solve a problem. So they don't necessarily want all the time to be given it and then you tell them how to solve it. That's not necessarily what they want to do. Part of AI is we're collaborating. We're going back and forth with the AI. And I think it doesn't matter whether or not it's AI or people. And here's where I think all of online business has to go, whether you are whether you're 35, whether you're 85, is anchoring in a hub. So in other words, you don't it doesn't matter what it is. I don't necessarily think it needs to be a Facebook group, but you got to bring people together. You got to capture them and put them someplace, and then you've got to make sure they don't um you make sure they don't vex each other. Right? That's part of your job, right? So when you run a community, every community is different. Some communities function where you provide content or you provide the information. However, you could be in a group where there's interaction. And so if your group is where there's interaction, your job is to make sure these people don't vex each other so they leave community. So you got to set up rules, you got to make sure there are things that happen. All of these things though are anchored in your level of expertise. And so one thing that I do want to do as I close out here tonight, I will start looking at questions if there are any. Um, as again, some of you all are white label customers and you purchase PLR. And so um, start thinking about selling curriculum. So in other words, start selling your interaction. So it's not just the content, it's what you add to it. Pivot towards your authority. So in other words, you become the bridge, not the content, not direct response. So in other words, if everything depends on your copy and cold traffic, you there's nothing separating you from anybody else. So what I think you've got to do now, what we've got to do now is we've got to do things to separate ourselves. We've got to be authoritative. We've got to be different, and that's really where you want to start thinking about it again. I do need to say this. I'm not getting anything for this, right? Google's not giving me anything, or I don't get anything. I don't even have an affiliate link yet. I need to get one. Um, but you need to be a verified expert in something. Now, maybe you don't necessarily like Google. That's fine. Then what you've got to do is you got to find one thing. You've got to go deep, right? You've got to become that person, right? You've got to be that verified expert someplace. Non-duplicable assets, right? Start creating things that people cannot do otherwise. So in other words, yes, anybody can put out a video course, but can they add the extra stuff that you add? Can they add in the camaraderie that you bring to solving problems? So part of the new mix is not just information, but it's also what you add that provides the word has always been, and this has not changed, or gives you a sustainable competitive advantage, where it is your USP, where it becomes the Mafia offer. So, in other words, I'm not just going to make you an offer to get stuff. I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. And so your offers now got to be so personal, so crazy that um, people would be insane to turn you down. That's where I think we've got to move. But at the same time, though, it's not just stuff, right? And so one of the ways in which you get an audience, you start getting people listening to you, is to start thinking about, okay, what level of authority do I have? So I'm going to kind of go back, and I will link out to where you can get these things. And in the description once this live video is complete. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. I think we're out of here in less than 30 minutes, which is my goal. And I'm going to try to see if I can get to if there are any questions. Let me stop sharing. Okay, so I'm not sharing my screen, so I'm going to pull up the let me pull up the live here. All right, I'll pull up the actual YouTube video. And I hope that I'm in here. All right. Let's see if I'm going to open this up and I will be able to see you then. Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay. William. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. William, I will put the link here in the description. So I didn't have a chance to do it when I got started. I will put the link um, for all the certifications here in the description. So you might have to check back once this live chat renders. I will get it there for you. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions? And I hope that this has been it's a little different, and hope that's been helpful to you, and something different, something to think about, right? Something different to think about. So, any questions? Any questions? Well, everybody, I appreciate y'all coming out to hang out with me here, those of you who are here. And if this has been helpful for you,